What if I told you that the story we know about Mary Magdalene could be completely wrong? For centuries, the Church has portrayed it in a way that perhaps does not correspond to reality. But what if there were forbidden documents, hidden in the Vatican's secret archives, that revealed a completely different truth? What would happen if Mary Magdalene's role was much greater than we have been told? The Vatican's secret library is one of the most mysterious places in the world, full of hidden manuscripts, forbidden texts, and secrets that have never become known to the public. And among these documents, there is evidence that Mary Magdalene was not just a follower of Jesus, but someone who may have played an essential role in the founding of Christianity. Why did the Church erase its true history? What was so dangerous about his existence that it needed to be hidden? We are not talking about simple theories. Apocryphal manuscripts, forgotten gospels, and forbidden texts mention Mary Magdalene in a way that traditional history has never accepted. The Vatican has already commented on these documents, but did they tell the whole truth? Or has history once again been manipulated to keep a secret that could change everything we know about Christianity? If this revelation is true, it means that for centuries we have been led to believe a distorted version of the facts. It means the Church may have silenced crucial information to maintain control over the religious narrative. But why? What did Mary Magdalene represent that so threatened Church leaders? Was she just a disciple, or did she have a much deeper role in Jesus' life? Get ready, because today we're going to explore hidden documents, forbidden accounts, and evidence the Vatican never wanted you to see. Every detail of this story can completely transform what we believe to be true. If you want to find out what really happened to Mary Magdalene and why her story was erased, keep watching, because what you see next could change everything. But before we dive even deeper into these forbidden secrets, I want you to join me in this investigation. If this story made you reflect and wonder what else might be hidden, leave a comment below with your prayer request. Faith has always been a central point in this search for truth, and together we can strengthen our spiritual connection. Whatever your need, let's pray together, because truth and faith go hand in hand. And don't forget to leave a like, because this helps this content reach more people who also want to discover the secrets that have been hidden for centuries. If you are not yet subscribed to the channel, click the subscribe button now and activate the bell so you don't miss the next videos. What we're about to reveal could transform everything you know about the Vatican and the history of Christianity. So get ready, because the next detail in this investigation is even more shocking. The official version of the Church has always portrayed Mary Magdalene as a repentant sinner, a woman who lived a life of mistakes until she found Jesus and completely changed her path. For centuries, this image was reinforced, fueling the idea that Mary Magdalene was just a follower, a disciple who recognized her sins and found redemption. But why has this narrative been so hammered over time? Was it just a misinterpretation or a purposeful attempt to hide something much bigger? The curious thing is that this image of Mary Magdalene as a sinner is not clearly described in the canonical Gospels. There is not a single passage in the Bible that explicitly says that she was a prostitute, but still this idea spread and became consolidated in the Christian tradition. In the 6th century, Pope Gregory the Great made a pronouncement that practically sealed this fate for Mary Magdalene. He unified several biblical passages and suggested that she was the sinful woman who anointed Jesus' feet, the same woman from whom Jesus cast 7 demons. This association remained for centuries, being reinforced in paintings, sermons, and even in literary and cinematographic works. Now, if we think about it, what would the Church gain by transforming Mary Magdalene into a simple redeemed sinner? The answer may lie in the need to erase any evidence that it had a leadership role within early Christianity. After all, if Mary Magdalene was seen as one of the central figures alongside Jesus, this could directly challenge the power structure of the Church, which has always been predominantly male. But this version began to fall apart. In 2016, Pope Francis himself took the unexpected step of elevating Mary Magdalene to the status of Apostle to the Apostles. This was a significant change, as it recognized that she was the first person to witness the resurrection of Christ and to bring this message to the disciples. But why did this reinterpretation happen after so many centuries? Was the truth becoming impossible to hide? The rehabilitation of The image of Mary Magdalene was not a mere symbolic gesture. It was a sign that something bigger was coming to the surface. Many scholars believe that there are documents in the secret Vatican archives that confirm that Mary Magdalene had a much deeper role, and that, perhaps, she was one of the leaders of the nascent church. This would explain the historical effort to minimize its importance. After all, if Mary Magdalene was a key player in early Christianity, why would she have been reduced to a simple, repentant sinner? And here comes an even more intriguing point. The apocryphal Gospels, texts that were excluded from the Bible, present a version of Mary Magdalene that is very different from the one the Church has traditionally taught. The Gospel of Mary, a Gnostic manuscript discovered in the 19th century, describes her as someone who had special knowledge about the teachings of Jesus, to the point of generating jealousy among the apostles. In the text itself, Peter questions why Jesus would give Mary a revelation that he did not share with the other disciples. This suggests that she was more than a follower. She was a teacher, someone who possessed a privileged understanding of the words of Christ. And if we go even further, we will find an even more controversial question. Did Mary Magdalene and Jesus have a more intimate relationship than was officially disclosed? There are fragments of ancient texts that mention that Jesus would have treated Mary in a special way, with the affection that went beyond what he showed for his other disciples. In some of these writings, Mary is called Jesus' companion, and there are even mentions of a kiss he gave her. This, of course, was strongly contested by the Church, but the question remains, if this possibility were real, wouldn't it explain why the figure of Mary Magdalene needed to be silenced and distorted over the centuries? The official history of the Vatican is full of gaps, and more researchers are questioning what was really hidden in the Church's secret archives. How many documents can there be that talk about Mary Magdalene and have been kept from public knowledge? Does the Vatican hold evidence that could completely rewrite her role in Christianity? If all this makes you question what else may have been hidden over the centuries, I want to know your opinion. Do you believe that Mary Magdalene was more than a simple disciple? Comment below. Mary Magdalene was silenced. If you think the Church hid the truth about it, I'm reading every comment, and together we can discover even more about this mystery. What would happen if I told you that there is a gospel that talks directly about Mary Magdalene? A forbidden text that presents a completely different version of the one we were taught. A manuscript that places her not as a simple follower of Jesus, but as someone who held secret teachings, as someone who understood the message of Christ in a way that no other disciple did. This text exists and is known as Gospel of Mary. But interestingly, he was never accepted by the Church. This apocryphal gospel, discovered at the end of the 19th century, presents a surprising account, in which Mary Magdalene appears as a true spiritual leader, the disciple who possessed special knowledge, and that Jesus entrusted to her secrets that were not revealed to the other apostles. But if this is true, why was this text rejected and banned by church leaders? What was it about him that was so dangerous that he was completely erased from the official history of Christianity? What becomes clear when analyzing this gospel is that Mary Magdalene had a deep connection with Jesus, not just as a follower, but as someone who understood his message on a level that others could not. This becomes evident when, at a certain point in the text, the disciples become lost and confused after Jesus' death. While they are gripped by fear and uncertainty, it is Mary Magdalene who stands up and encourages them, passing on to them the words and teachings that Christ entrusted to her. But this leadership attitude was not well received by everyone. Peter, one of Jesus' closest disciples, opposes Mary Magdalene's authority, questioning how Jesus could have given revelations to her and not them. And here, the great conflict begins. Pedro simply does not accept that a woman has received teachings that he himself did not receive. He doubts her, questions her credibility, and demonstrates clear resistance to the idea that Mary Magdalene could occupy a leadership position within the group. This rivalry is one of the most intriguing points of the Gospel of Mary, as it reveals something that was hardly mentioned in the canonical Gospels: the dispute for control of Jesus' message. Did the Church want to erase the figure of Mary Magdalene precisely because this would call into question the entire patriarchal structure that had been formed over the centuries? But this is not the only text that suggests that Mary Magdalene was more than a follower. Other apocryphal Gospels also reinforce this idea. Note Gospel of Philip, for example, there is a passage that mentions Mary as Jesus' companion. This excerpt has generated numerous theories and speculations, as the word used in the original text can mean both a close follower and a wife or intimate partner. Furthermore, this Gospel also suggests that Jesus showed a special affection for Mary Magdalene, something that is not common in the official Gospels. What if this is true? What if Mary Magdalene not only understood Jesus' teachings, but also played a central role in continuing his message? This would explain why Peter and other disciples might have felt threatened by her. If Jesus entrusted Mary Magdalene with secret teachings, if he chose her to be the spiritual leader of his followers, then the entire structure that we know today about the foundation of Christianity could have been different. Imagine for a moment what the history of Christianity would be like if Mary Magdalene had not been erased. If his position as leader had been accepted from the beginning, would the church have become an institution run exclusively by men? Would women have had a more active role within the religion? What we do know is that, throughout history, the church has taken numerous steps to ensure that the official narrative was maintained, and that any document presenting a different version was discarded or classified as heresy. The big question is the Vatican aware of this information? Are there even more secret documents hidden in their archives that prove that Mary Magdalene was, in fact, a spiritual leader, and that her influence was deliberately erased? The Church spent centuries hiding texts, silencing voices, and shaping history so that only a single version was accepted. But now, with the discoveries of these ancient manuscripts, this forbidden truth may finally come to light. The early Church needed to reinforce male leadership, and Mary Magdalene represented a real danger to this structure that was beginning to be consolidated. If she were accepted as a central figure in nascent Christianity, it would mean that women could occupy leadership positions within the church, something that the apostles were clearly not prepared to accept. Mary Magdalene was a threat, as her closeness to Jesus, her deep understanding of the teachings, and her role in the most decisive moments in Christian history called into question the authority of the men who proclaimed themselves successors of Christ. Imagine the impact it would have if, instead of Peter, Mary Magdalene had been recognized as the main bearer of Jesus' message. This would completely change the dynamics of the Christian faith and the structure of the church, which for centuries excluded women from top positions and most important decisions. But the truth is that there is evidence that this is exactly what happened. In the Gospel of Mary, Peter clearly demonstrates his discomfort with the fact that Jesus gave her secret teachings, something that was not shared with the other disciples. This male resistance to the role of Mary Magdalene may have been the first step in demoting her in history and distorting her importance within Christianity. The church needed to create a solid hierarchical structure, and this meant establishing a succession system based on the figure of Peter and other male disciples. They could not allow a woman to be seen as a spiritual leader, much less as someone who had access to direct revelations from Jesus. For this new structure to be accepted, Mary Magdalene needed to be diminished, her importance needed to be erased, and her image needed to be transformed into something harmless. And that's exactly what happened. The strategy used was simple, but extremely efficient. Mary Magdalene was associated with the figure of the repentant sinner, a woman marked by sin who found redemption at the feet of Christ. This version of his story began to be disseminated and, over the centuries, became consolidated as the absolute truth. Mary Magdalene's transformation into a repentant prostitute not only reduced her importance within Christianity, but also served as a clear message about the role of women in the church. They could be forgiven, they could be accepted, but they could never lead. And this was not the only form of erasure that Mary Magdalene suffered. When the Gospels were compiled, to form the Bible as we know it today, several texts were excluded, and among them were Gospels that portrayed her as a leader and not just a follower. These texts were labeled as heretical, banned by the church, and in many cases, destroyed so that they never reached the public. Could the Vatican's secret library contain these documents? How much evidence is still hidden kept under absolute secrecy so that this truth never comes to light. The fact is that over the centuries, the Church has consolidated a single and indisputable narrative about its foundation. Peter was elevated to the status of supreme leader, the first pope, and his succession created the structure we know today. But what if that hadn't happened? What if Mary Magdalene had been recognized as the true bearer of Christ's message? What would the Church be like today if, from the beginning, women had been accepted as spiritual leaders? The impact of this would be immeasurable, and perhaps that is exactly why this truth needed to be erased. Even after centuries, this issue still generates discomfort within the Church. When Pope Francis elevated Mary Magdalene to the title of Apostle to the Apostles in 2016, it was a belated recognition of her importance, but at the same time it did not alter the patriarchal structure of the Church in any way. Mary Magdalene continues to be seen as a secondary figure, while the true depth of her connection with Jesus continues to be ignored. But now, with the discovery and re-evaluation of ancient texts, this story is beginning to emerge again. The Vatican may continue to deny it, it may try to keep certain documents secret, but the truth has the power to find its way. What if these documents are revealed? If there are records kept that prove that Mary Magdalene was one of the greatest leaders of early Christianity, is the Church prepared to deal with this revelation? If this story makes sense to you, if you believe that Mary Magdalene was erased from history to keep power in the hands of men, I want to know your opinion. Comment below. The truth about Mary Magdalene needs to be revealed, and let's spread this message. If there's anything history teaches us, it's that the truth always finds a way to emerge, no matter how hard we try to hide it. Over the centuries, the Church carefully controlled what information was preserved and what needed to be silenced. But now, independent researchers and historians have begun examining ancient documents, many of them previously inaccessible, and are finding surprising evidence that disputes the official version of the story of Mary Magdalene and of Christianity itself. Secret archives, forgotten manuscripts, and forbidden texts are being analyzed, and little by little, they reveal a very different picture from the one we were taught. Among the most impressive discoveries are the Dead Sea Scrolls, found in caves near the Dead Sea in 1947. These texts, dating back more than 2,000 years, are considered one of the most important archaeological finds in history, as they offer glimpses of an era when religion was still being shaped. What these manuscripts reveal is that there was a plurality of beliefs in early Christianity, and some of these beliefs place Mary Magdalene in a central role, a role that was gradually erased by the Church. Some fragments found indicate that there were early Christian communities that not only accepted, but also venerated Mary Magdalene as an extremely important figure. This corroborates other historical documents, such as the Gnostic Gospels, which portray her not as a simple follower, but as a spiritual leader who had access to profound teachings and special revelations. But if these records exist, why have they not been widely publicized? What prevents the public from having unrestricted access to these documents? The answer may lie in the strict control that the Vatican exercises over texts considered sensitive. The Vatican's secret. Library houses thousands of manuscripts and documents that have never been made available to the public. Some scholars who have had limited access to these archives claim that there are texts that could completely rewrite the history of Christianity, calling into question centuries of dogma and beliefs. There are reports of researchers who tried to expose this information, but were discredited or silenced before they could bring their findings to the general public. And this brings us to an even more intriguing point. Recent books and academic studies have begun to challenge the official Church version. The work of modern historians such as Karen King, an expert on early Christianity, has brought to light documents that suggest that Mary Magdalene may have had a much deeper relationship with Jesus than previously thought. In 2012, a papyrus fragment called the Gospel of Jesus' Wife was revealed to the world, containing an enigmatic phrase in which Jesus refers to Mary Magdalene as my wife. This discovery was harshly attacked by conservative sectors of the Church, who immediately tried to disqualify it, claiming that the document could be false. But the truth is that this was neither the first nor the only evidence to suggest that Mary Magdalene played a more significant role in Jesus' life. Other studies point to a strong connection between Mary Magdalene and the esoteric teachings of Christ. In Gnostic texts, she is portrayed as someone who understood Jesus' message in a way that the other disciples could not. In some passages, she is shown as the only one capable of interpreting Jesus' words correctly, while the others, especially Peter, demonstrate jealousy and resistance. This pattern of rivalry between Peter and Mary Magdalene appears repeatedly in the forbidden text, suggesting that from the beginning there was an effort to downplay its importance. But the question remains, if all this evidence exists, why was the story we were told so different? Why did the Church go to such lengths to ensure that Mary Magdalene was seen only as a repentant sinner? The answer may lie in the impact this truth would have on the power structure of the Church. If it were proven that Mary Magdalene had a leadership role, that she had secret teachings, and that she was possibly even a companion of Jesus, this would directly challenge papal authority and the entire ecclesiastical hierarchy built over the centuries. This forbidden truth is still being discovered, and the Vatican, aware of its power, knows it cannot simply ignore these revelations, but it also cannot allow them to be widely accepted, as this would destabilize the foundation on which the Church was built. So the strategy continues to be to discredit, hide, and maintain control over the official narrative. But will this strategy work forever? With the advancement of research, with increasing access to previously restricted documents, and with people's growing curiosity about the Church's secrets, the truth may be closer to coming to light than ever. Gnostic Gospels are one of the biggest keys to understanding the true story of Mary Magdalene and what the Vatican may be hiding. These texts, which were considered heretical and banned by the Church, present a completely different view of early Christianity and Jesus' relationship with his disciples. Unlike the canonical Gospels that were selected by the Church to compose the New Testament, Gnostic texts speak of hidden knowledge, spiritual wisdom that should not be accessible to everyone. And within these writings, one name appears prominently over and over again: Mary Magdalene. But why are these documents so threatening? What is it about them that the Church doesn't want us to know? Many of these Gospels were discovered in 1945 in the Nag Hammadi region of Egypt. They were hidden for centuries, protected from persecution, as they were considered too dangerous for institutionalized Christianity. Within these texts, Mary Magdalene is portrayed very differently than we are used to. Instead of a simple follower or repentant sinner, she appears as someone with a deep spiritual connection to Jesus, someone who received special teachings and who possessed an understanding that the other disciples did not have. One of these Gospels, the Gospel of Philip, even refers to Mary Magdalene as the companion of Jesus, a word that has generated countless debates. This term could just mean a close follower, but it could also indicate something much more intimate. And this is where one of the most controversial discoveries in recent history comes in: the Gospel of the Wife of Jesus. This papyrus fragment, revealed by historian Karen King in 2012, contains a phrase that shook the religious world. Jesus said to them, "My wife." This small, apparently insignificant excerpt triggered a real earthquake within the Church, because if it is authentic, it suggests that Jesus was married, and not to just anyone, but to Mary Magdalene. The question that arises is this papyrus true or false? As soon as he was introduced to the world, the Church and several conservative academics immediately tried to discredit him. Some analyzers have suggested that the document could be a modern forgery, but other experts point out that its composition and writing style are compatible with ancient texts. And even if this particular fragment were considered inauthentic, what it represents is something much greater. It is not the only document to suggest that Mary Magdalene may have had a much deeper relationship with Jesus. The idea that Jesus could have been married bothers the Church so much because it completely contradicts the image that has been built over the centuries. Jesus' celibacy is one of the pillars of Christian tradition, as it reinforces the idea that he was above earthly concerns, that his mission was exclusively spiritual. But if it were proven that he had a wife, it would drastically shake up that narrative. More than that, it would change the way we see Mary Magdalene. Instead of a follower, she would be his companion, someone who stood by his side not just as a disciple, but as an equal. And this revelation would not only alter the image of Jesus, but would call into question the entire structure of the Catholic Church. The institution has always reinforced the idea that priests must remain celibate, following the example of Christ. But if Jesus was not celibate, then where does this rule come from? If Mary Magdalene was his wife, why were women removed from the priesthood and excluded from religious leadership? Furthermore, there is another fundamental question. What else is hidden in the Vatican archives? If there are texts that suggest a relationship between Jesus and Mary Magdalene, does the Church have even more explicit documents about this? It wouldn't be surprising if evidence of this nature was closely guarded within the Vatican secret. Library, one of the most inaccessible places in the world. How many other apocryphal manuscripts are still under lock and key, protected from public curiosity because their contents could shake the foundations of the Christian faith? The truth is that there are many loose pieces in this story, and each new discovery points to the possibility that Mary Magdalene played a much more important role than we have been told. If the Gnostic Gospels portray her as a spiritual leader, if manuscripts like the Gospel of Philip and the Gospel of Mary speak of her closeness to Jesus, if even a fragment of papyrus mentions that she could be his wife, then why does the Church continue to insist on the traditional narrative? If this whole issue makes you reflect on what really happened 2,000 years ago, I want to know your opinion. Do you believe that Mary Magdalene was more than just a follower of Jesus? Does the Church hide documents that prove its importance? Comment below. Mary Magdalene knew the truth, to show that we want these mysteries to be revealed. Your comment is essential for this video to reach more people and this discussion to continue alive. Mary Magdalene was the first person to witness the resurrection of Jesus. This in itself is already something extraordinary, and at the same time, very questioning. If Mary Magdalene really was an irrelevant figure, a minor disciple, or just a repentant sinner, why would she have been chosen to witness the most important event in Christianity? This is one of the great contradictions in the official narrative of the Church, which over the centuries has tried to minimize its role. But the Gospels clearly record that while the other disciples were hiding, gripped by fear, it was Mary Magdalene was the one who remained firm. It was she who sought Jesus in the tomb, and it was to her that he appeared first. When the resurrected Jesus revealed himself to Mary Magdalene, she immediately called him Rabboni, an Aramaic word, meaning my master or my teacher. This detail may seem small, but it is actually extremely significant. In the Gospels, the disciples called Jesus Rabbi, which was a term used to refer to a teacher or spiritual master. But Mary Magdalene used Rabboni, a much more intimate and personal form of this word. This detail suggests a much greater proximity between the two than the Church admits. And if she was the only one to address him that way, what does that reveal about their relationship? But the scene of Jesus' resurrection and his appearance to Mary Magdalene didn't just stop at the dialogue between the two. After that moment, he gives her a very clear order. Go and tell my brothers that I am alive. In other words, Jesus entrusted Mary Magdalene with the mission of bringing the news of the resurrection to the apostles. This means that she was the first messenger of the resurrected Christ, the first preacher of the good news, the one who had the mission to announce victory over death. And yet, why has the Church ignored this information for centuries? Why was this central position of hers reduced? The answer may lie in the apostles themselves. When Mary Magdalene went to tell Peter and the other disciples that she had seen Jesus, what was their reaction? Rather than accepting immediately, the Gospels record that they doubted her. They even considered his words to be delusions. Why? Because it was inconceivable for them that a woman had been chosen to witness such a grand event. They hoped that if Jesus had really been resurrected, he would have appeared to Peter or John, those who were supposed to lead the nascent church. But no, he appeared to Mary Magdalene, and this completely shook the power structure that the disciples wanted to build. This initial rejection of the apostles already gives us a clue as to how the Church would treat Mary Magdalene in the following centuries. If his importance was questioned from the beginning, it is not difficult to imagine how, over the years, his figure became increasingly obscured and reduced. The early leaders of the Church needed to consolidate a hierarchy in which only men had authority. And for this, it was essential that the importance of Mary Magdalene was erased. And the proof of this is in the Gospels themselves. In Gnostic texts, which were prohibited and excluded from the Bible, Mary Magdalene appears constantly arguing with Peter. In some of these Gospels, like the Gospel of Mary, there are excerpts that clearly show Pedro's jealousy and distrust towards her. He even questions why Jesus would have entrusted secret teachings to her and not to them. This type of dispute shows that, since the early years of Christianity, Mary Magdalene was already seen as a threat to male leadership. Now imagine the impact this story would have had if it had been told differently. If the Church had recognized Mary Magdalene as the first messenger of Christ, the first apostle, the first leader of the Christian movement, what would the role of women within religion be like today? Would the Catholic Church allow them to be priests, bishops, popes? Would the entire ecclesiastical structure we know have been different? But instead of recognizing its importance, the Church chose to downgrade it. He chose to associate her with a sinner, spread the idea that she was a prostitute, and did everything to ensure that her story was told in a distorted way. For centuries, sermons spoke of Peter as the great successor of Jesus, as the pillar of the Church. But what about Mary Magdalene? She who was at Christ's side until the end, who did not run away, who was the first to see him resurrected, was reduced to a background figure. And now, with the discoveries of ancient manuscripts, with the forbidden Gospels coming to light, with growing curiosity about the secrets of the Vatican, this story is beginning to be retold. What the Church has tried to hide for so long is finally being revealed. But there is still a lot to be discovered. How many documents about Mary Magdalene are locked in the Vatican's secret library? How many texts are still kept from the public eye because they could change the way we view the history of Christianity? Over the centuries, the Church has attempted to reduce Mary Magdalene to a secondary figure, distorting her history and obscuring her true importance within early Christianity. But in recent decades, something has changed. Her image began to be rehabilitated, and more people started to question the official version that we were taught. Ancient documents, hidden manuscripts, and previously ignored apocryphal Gospels began to be studied in more depth, bringing to light a new perspective on his life and legacy. The Vatican, however much it resisted for centuries, was forced to recognize that Mary Magdalene was not just a repentant sinner. And in 2016, for the first time in history, Pope Francis elevated her position within the Church, granting her the title of Apostle to the Apostles, something that directly contradicts the narrative that the Church has held for so long. But why did this change happen? Why did the Church suddenly decide to give Mary Magdalene greater recognition? The answer may lie in the pressure generated by modern discoveries. Apocryphal Gospels, previously considered heretical, began to be widely studied by historians and researchers. The Gospel of Mary, for example, shows a completely different version of the relationship between Jesus and Mary Magdalene. In this text, she not only receives direct teachings from Christ, but is also seen as someone who understands his words better than any other disciple. In several passages, Peter shows irritation and doubt about why Jesus would have entrusted teachings to Mary Magdalene and not him. This gospel suggests that she had much deeper spiritual knowledge and that her role was to leadership, not submission. And when this information began to gain strength, the Church needed to react. Another determining factor for this rehabilitation was the growth of interest in primitive Christianity and the role of women within the faith. The rise of movements of feminine spirituality caused Mary Magdalene to be rescued as a powerful symbol. Instead of seeing her as a woman who needed to be forgiven, many began to see her as a strong, wise, independent, and essential woman for the dissemination of Jesus' teachings. This has caused several modern churches and religious groups to question why the Catholic Church, for centuries, excluded women from the priesthood and denied them any leadership position. Religious feminism also had a significant impact on the way Mary Magdalene came to be viewed. If in the past she was labeled as a sinner to justify the exclusion of women from the Church, today she is rescued as the greatest example that women have always played a fundamental role within Christianity, but that this role was silenced to ensure male domination. Many theologians and scholars believe that if Mary Magdalene had been recognized as a leader from the beginning, perhaps Christianity itself would have followed a different path, allowing for more active participation by women in the church. And this movement did not stop in theology. In recent years, films, books, and documentaries have begun to explore the idea that Mary Magdalene had a much deeper connection to Jesus than we have been taught. Works like The Da Vinci Code popularized the theory that Mary Magdalene could have been not just a disciple, but the wife of Jesus and the true leader of the early church. Although the church was quick to classify these ideas as fiction, the reality is that these types of theories caused millions of people around the world to begin questioning the official story, and we cannot ignore the impact that recent archaeological discoveries have had on this debate. In addition to the Dead Sea Scrolls, which reveal important details about the diversity of beliefs in early Christianity, other ancient documents were analyzed and began to point to a pattern. If most of the banned texts mention Mary Magdalene in a positive way, why did the church choose to eliminate them? Why were the Gospels that speak well of Peter preserved, while those that place Mary Magdalene in a prominent position were destroyed or classified as heretical? The rehabilitation of the image of Mary Magdalene is also directly linked to the growing desire of many people to reconnect with a purer spirituality, far from the historical manipulations of the church. While the institution still maintains a traditional and restrictive vision, more and more believers are seeking answers outside of official dogma, turning to prohibited texts and alternative theories. This makes interest in Mary Magdalene grow even more, as she represents a figure of resistance, of true faith, of direct connection with Jesus and his teachings, without the need for an ecclesiastical structure to mediate them. But there is something even more intriguing about all this. If the church was able to hide the true story of Mary Magdalene for centuries, what else could be hidden in the Vatican's secret archives? How many other documents were suppressed because they didn't fit the narrative the church wanted to establish? Are there records that confirm that Mary Magdalene played an essential role in the formation of Christianity? Is there evidence that she not only led followers of Jesus, but that her influence could have completely changed the way the church developed? If this story makes you question everything we've been taught, I want to know your opinion. Do you believe that Mary Magdalene was intentionally demoted so that the church could consolidate its power? Do you think there are still secrets kept in the Vatican that could change our view of Christianity? Comment below. The truth about Mary Magdalene needs to be revealed to show that we want these answers. Your comment is essential for this video to reach more people and this discussion to continue alive. If the church was able to omit or distort the true story of Mary Magdalene, what else could be hidden? What other truths were silenced over the centuries so that only a single version of the costumes prevailed? That's the question that more and more researchers and historians have been asking as they come across forgotten documents, forbidden manuscripts, and evidence. That indicates that the history we know may be just one part of a much larger puzzle, and the answer may lie in the Vatican's secret archives, where thousands of ancient texts remain inaccessible to the public, protected by an institution that tightly controls what can and cannot be revealed. If Mary Magdalene was deliberately reduced to a secondary figure, it means that the church always knew her importance and chose to hide her. But why? What would happen if this truth was finally exposed? The revelation of Mary Magdalene's true role could completely change the way we view Christianity. For centuries, we have been taught that the church was built on Peter, that he was the chosen one to lead the followers of Jesus, and that all popes throughout history carry this direct succession. But what if Mary Magdalene had been the true spiritual leader left by Christ? This would dismantle the entire power structure that the church has established, a system based on the exclusion of women and the centralization of authority in the hands of a small group of men. And we're not just talking about a historical detail. This would profoundly affect the way millions of people view religion. If Mary Magdalene was more than a follower, if she was the first apostle, the person to whom Jesus entrusted his most important message, then all the doctrines created over the centuries to keep women away from religious leadership would lose their foundation. The church has always maintained that only men can hold the priesthood because Jesus chose men as apostles. But if Mary Magdalene was also chosen, and not just as a disciple but as a leader, then this justification falls apart. This would explain why the Church needed to erase her history, transform her into a sinner, and demote her to an irrelevant role. Because recognizing its true importance would mean admitting that early Christianity was different from what we were taught, and this issue goes beyond the role of women in the Church. If there was an effort to degrade Mary Magdalene, that means there was an effort to keep certain truths hidden, to ensure that only one convenient version of the story was accepted. And this is the most dangerous point of this whole issue. If the Church manipulated history in this way, what else might have been changed or hidden? How many other characters were deleted? How many teachings were deliberately removed? The most frightening thing is that there are indications that documents kept in the Vatican could confirm these theories. The Vatican's secret library contains thousands of manuscripts that have never been accessed by the public, including texts dating back to the first centuries of Christianity. Why does the Church refuse to release these documents? What could be in them that would change everything? Are there more detailed records about the relationship between Jesus and Mary Magdalene? Is there evidence that she played a central role and that her leadership was erased by the apostles? Recovering the true role of Mary Magdalene is not only a historical issue, but also a matter of justice. For centuries, his image was tarnished, his importance was reduced, and his connection to Jesus was denied. Returning it to where it belongs is correcting a mistake made by the Church and ensuring that future generations know the truth. And more than that, it means opening your eyes to what may lie beyond this story. Because if a truth like this could be hidden for so long, how many others are still waiting to be revealed? If all of this has made you question what really happened to Mary Magdalene, then you need to ask yourself, if the Church was able to hide this part of the story, what else could be hidden within the Vatican's secret archives? For centuries, this institution stored prohibited documents, ancient manuscripts, and texts that were never released to the public. What is it about these records that could shake the fabric of the Church? How many truths are still locked inside the Vatican secret library, protected under lock and key, so that no one discovers what really happened in the early days of Christianity? The Vatican has always been shrouded in mystery. In addition to being the center of the Catholic Church, it is also one of the most inaccessible places in the world. Only a few people are allowed to access the documents stored in their underground vaults, and what we know about these archives comes from sporadic reports and information leaks. But there are signs that inside there are manuscripts that were deliberately excluded from official history, texts that could not only confirm the importance of Mary Magdalene, but also reveal even deeper secrets about Jesus, the apostles, and the true origin of Christianity. Among the most mysterious documents are the so-called Lost Gospels, texts that were removed from the Bible and classified as apocryphal. Some of these Gospels suggest that there was a fierce struggle for control of the early Church and that Mary Magdalene was at the center of this battle. Others talk about secret teachings of Jesus, teachings that were never revealed to the public because they could completely change the way Christianity is practiced today. And the most intriguing thing is that, in addition to religious texts, the Vatican is believed to keep documents that detail historical events and connections between the Church and powerful governments over the centuries. Records within the Vatican's secret library are rumored to contain information about ancient civilizations, forbidden technologies, and even possible contacts with entities the Church never wanted to admit. If all this is right, we are talking about a store of knowledge that could transform what we know about humanity and its history. Now, if you think this story is already surprising, wait until you see what comes next. In the next videos, we will reveal even more secret Vatican documents and expose mysteries that have been hidden for centuries. If you want to continue this investigation and discover truths that could change everything you believe, click on the next video and get ready to discover the darkest and most forbidden archives of the Church. I know you felt the voice of God speaking to you through this video. Don't ignore this call. This means that you are seeking the truth, that something inside you knows that there is much more hidden than we have been told. Then, subscribe to the channel now and activate the bell to continue this journey of discovery. Here we will reveal everything that has been hidden, explore forbidden mysteries, and bring to light truths that the Vatican never wanted you to know. I know you've come this far. Comment now. The truth needs to be revealed to show that we no longer accept lies and hidden secrets. I'm reading every comment and want to know your opinion. And if this video touched you, leave a like now. This not only helps me continue to bring this content, but it also helps this video reach more people who need to know this truth. Now, don't stop here. The next video is already appearing on the screen, and in it, we will reveal secret Vatican documents that could change everything. Click now and continue this investigation, because what you discover could transform your view of history forever.